I scaled this e-commerce brand right here to $262,616 in a matter of 30 days at a 21.90x ROAS, a level of profitability I have not seen in the 5 years I've been running Google Ads. And in this video, I want to go over the 5 things which we did to achieve this level of ROAS so you can use these 5 things to do the exact same for your own brand. But with that, let's go over thing number 1 we did, which is for this brand, we tested extremely broad in the beginning to get things going. Now, what do I mean by this exactly? We actually began working with this brand under my Google Ads agency way back last year in 2023. The first day that we launched ads was in September. But during this initial time period when we didn't have a lot of data incoming or when the brand was pretty much brand new to Google Ads, we did not do the normal approach. Now, what is the normal approach? The normal approach for 99% of e-commerce brands is to go into the keyword planner tool, find the most relevant keywords that are the most ideal for their products, and then use them within product titles, Google Merchant Center, the product feed, etc. So to do the opposite, what we did here is we went after the most broad audiences. So think of it like this. If we were selling a plastic bottle that was only 16 ounces, instead of going after the keyword that's literally 16-ounce plastic bottle, we omitted the 16-ounce port and went after plastic bottle. And the reason why we did this is to keep things very broad, to keep things very natural, so that when it came to the Google Ads algorithm, it could go out and find a small piece from the big pie. You don't want a small piece from a small pie. Instead, you want a small piece from the big pie. And that ended up working really well for this brand because on the first day that we launched ads, we spent roughly $100, $130 from what I remember, $154, and we got back $3,700. That was already almost a 20x ROAS then. And from that point on, things were just on fire for this brand simply because we went against the grain and we went broad. And then later on, once results started really coming in, once the scale started to really expand and go crazy, that's when we went narrow. We went to the insight section, the auction insight section, or just this insight section in general, and we dug deep to figure out what this brand responds to the best, which are the ideal keywords, which aren't, which are the good products. And then from there, we began the optimization phase. What we did is once we had enough data, then we came into the keyword section right here, the search term insights, and we found a lot of valuable information, which we could then use to further optimize the feed and now make it more narrow. But this directly brings us to the second thing we did differently here, which allowed us to scale to a 21x ROAS, and that is bringing focus on the top countries. Now, going back to the campaigns, if we look at a lot of these campaigns which have been running in the past, which are now shut off, these are performance max or standard shopping campaigns for different countries, Australia, UK, even countries like Japan, countries like Mexico. And that was because of 2 reasons. Number 1 reason, the brand could actually ship to these countries. Number 2 reason, we did not want to just put all our eggs in one basket like 95% of other e-commerce brands do and just go after USA, because for this niche, the US market is extremely competitive. It is on the higher ticket end. These are products which sell on average for $300 to $500. Sometimes the average order value can be thousands of dollars. So what we did is we enhanced our focus, we broadened it, and we went after other countries. From here, what we understood was a lot of these other countries don't really have the buying power to buy products like these. As you can see, the ROAS, although it seems like it was great at 3.85x ROAS and 1.70, first of all, it's below the break even. The break even for this brand is almost an 8x to a 10x ROAS. So this was way below break even. And for the other countries, which were like Australia, where it's a 13x ROAS, it was really not consistent. On some days, it would be a 13x ROAS for some campaigns, and other times it would just not be there. So what we did was we kind of just tested multiple different countries to remove the reliance on just one country we have. And each country had its own campaign strategy. Each country went with its own campaign because we never like to mix up countries within an individual PMax or just any campaign for that matter. Because if you think about it, every country in the world has a different way of searching for your products. A product that's as simple as a plastic bottle can be searched up entirely differently in a country like say Japan or in a country like say China. So you don't want to just put a one-size-fits-all approach, especially when you're going after multiple countries, and instead go after one country at a time. And it's very highly recommended if you want to achieve ROAS values like this, because although a lot of these countries did not end up working, they fed the account enough data where now these other countries and their new keywords could now be applied by the algorithm within the USA or within the other main countries we were going after. But now this brings us to the third important thing we did here, which is narrow down the asset group's focus. Now, I mentioned earlier you want to narrow down the focus of just your keywords once you have enough data, but most e-commerce brands, that's where they stop. They don't go beyond the surface level scaling, and that's where 99% mess up. If you truly want to scale your e-commerce brand, you need to go a bit deeper inside your campaigns, especially the performance max campaigns, which your brand is so reliant on. And what we did here is within the asset group section, we really went inside and we really started testing individually. So if you look right here, we tested approaches like feed only. We tested approaches like a full build, meaning certain assets with certain images, logos, etc., with a strategy called the super signal strategy, where it was all retargeting based signals. We also tested a strategy where it's feed only with certain signals in there. So as you can see, we're choosing something very specific. If it's signals, we're just choosing individual signals, and then we're keeping everything else the same. So this was feed only as well. This was feed only with no signals. So this gave us the ability to understand if whether these signals were working better or if it was just the products themselves that were working better. What most e-commerce brands do is they put in a bunch of images, they put in a bunch of logos, headlines, etc., and then they're like, hey Google, go out and find me winners. I don't know what it's gonna be, I don't really care, just go out and find me something. And this is one of the worst approaches you can do, because not only does this limit your own ability to know what's working versus what's not, because if you provide 16 images, you have no idea which one of these 16 images is really getting you sales. And Google does not do a good job of telling you either, because if you look right here, all it says is best, not applicable. It says low, but we have no idea what that means. Does low mean 1 sale or low mean 0 sales? So it's too many unanswered questions. So what we like to do, we like to choose one testing factor, whether it's signals or whether it's certain images, logos, etc., and only test around that and keep everything else the same. So that's the approach we took here. We found that feed only approaches really work better in the beginning. So what we did is we tested feed only with certain signals, then we tested feed only with no signals, and then we figured out that actually none of these work as well as a super signal approach. So that's essentially what we went after, and now we're going to be testing a full build like this one with images, logos, etc., but with different kinds of signals. And it's all about really pulling apart your asset groups, going as narrow as you can, and literally testing every single thing possible, from each individual signal to each individual search theme if you decide to add them, to each individual image, logo, etc., because otherwise you really don't know what works versus what doesn't. And this was one of our really breakthroughs for this brand to achieve a 21x ROAS. But thing number 4 we did here, we utilized a lot of the website offers and promos within the Google Merchant Center. So for the sake of this example, we're gonna again go after the 16-ounce plastic bottle example, and what we essentially did is we found any promos which the brand had running at the moment, whether it's certain percentage off or just certain kind of dollar amounts, or just finding a way to stand out, and we essentially put that within our Google Shopping Ads approach via the Google Merchant Center. So here, the perfect example is reviews. Having reviews when nobody else has reviews. Or if we, for example, now look a bit deeper and type in the keyword levitating lamp, for example, we can see just these things in effect. So for example, if we look through, we can see a lot of these has reviews, but if we look right here, Cool Gadget has their pricing in the color green, and that's the only one that literally has this. Nobody has the price in the color green, and this can be done via the Google Merchant Center via adding certain promos and coupons, which is exactly what we did here. And this really worked for this brand's favor, because just like this example, this brand also had no other competitor doing that. So we were able to really stand out immediately by just making the color of our pricing green. And it's not always about just applying whatever promos or whatever reviews you can within the Merchant Center. It's rather about taking an approach which is something nobody else is really doing or has done, and that's what helps you stand out from your competitors. But now this brings us to the 5th and final thing we did for this brand, which is something we do for a lot of the brands we work with under my Google Ads agency, which, by the way, if you run a brand doing $50,000 to $80,000 per month and you want to scale to multi-6, multi-7 figures per month with Google Ads alone, go onto my website at yourmarketing.com and schedule a free call with me to see essentially how we can work together and make that happen. But essentially, the first thing that we did here was we started lowering the ROAS, the return on ad spend restrictions, as time went on. So initially what we had for this e-commerce brand is we had a very heavy restriction, because without the restrictions, this brand and the Performance Max campaigns were going crazy. We used to have this to be at like 1500%, 2000% even, which is a 20x ROAS, because that's kind of the results we were aiming at. And because of this, it's obvious that a lot of the ad spend was not there. We were barely spending $50 to $100 a day when we were supposed to be spending $300 to $500 a day. But it was needed to train the algorithm to go after the highest quality traffic possible. And we did this for a couple of weeks. That was our initial strategy. Once we started gaining momentum, once we started getting a few initial sales, that's when we switched our approach completely and we started lowering restrictions. So right now it's at 1100%. It might seem like it's still a very big number. However, it was much bigger before. Now, don't get me wrong. This is not the only strategy we had where it was just a bunch of restrictions and that's it. We also had other campaigns going on with no restrictions at all. And it was needed to kind of balance out the restrictive campaigns. However, over time, you want to gradually lower the restrictions, especially if the results are there. And in this situation, we saw the results were there. It was very consistent. We were spending $400 or $500, making back $7,000 to $10,000 in any given day. And so we just kind of went with the flow and we started lowering the restrictions. It kind of reacted positively. As you can see, the last 30 days, it spent about $12,000, made back that 21x ROAS. And now we're going to continue lowering the restrictions to improve this ad spend, to increase it so that we can continue scaling this brand to the very next level with Google Ads. But keep in mind, it's always a balance between restrictions versus no restrictions. You don't want to go to any extreme on both ends. That's essentially how we're maintaining 21x ROAS for a brand like this, which is high ticket, and a lot of the other brands which we handle. Again, which if you run a brand doing $50,000 or more per month in revenue, you want to scale to the next level with Google Ads, go onto my website at yourmarketing.com and schedule a free call with me to see essentially how we can work together and make that happen. But check out this video right here on the top 5 Performance Max campaign strategies you should be using in 2024 and onwards to get results like these ones.